Hello students, today we are going to discuss a beautiful short story by O. Henry called The Gift of the Magi. William Sidney Potter was the writer's name. He used his pen name O. Henry. He was an American writer who was born in 1862 and he died on June 5th, 1910. His short stories are some of the best short stories written anytime. O. Henry was an American short story writer who was very well known for his short stories which had surprise endings. Now that was the USP of his stories. Let us start. William Sidney Potter was born on 11 September 1862 in Greensboro, North Carolina. As a child, Potter was always reading everything from classics to dime novels. His favorite works were Lane's translation of 1001 Nights and Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. Potter graduated from Evelina Maria Potter's Elementary School in 1876. In 1879, he started working in his uncle's drugstore, and in 1881, at the age of 19, he became a licensed pharmacist. At this drugstore, he also showed off his natural artistic talents by sketching the town folks. Now let us look at the story, The Gift of the Magi. The Gift of the Magi is a story about a young couple who are short of money but desperately want to buy each other Christmas gifts. The two characters are Jim and Della. Without telling Jim, Della sells her most valuable possession, her beautiful hair, in order to buy a platinum fob chain for Jim's watch, which Della is unaware of. Jim sells his own most valuable possession, his watch, to buy jeweled combs for Della's hair. The essential premise of this story has been copied, reworked, parodied and otherwise retold countless times in the centuries since it was written. Now let us discuss the genre of The Gift of the Magi. The genre of the story is that of a parable. What is a parable? A parable is a short allegorical story designed to illustrate or teach some truth, religious principle or moral lesson. It is also a statement or comment that conveys a meaning indirectly by the use of comparison, analogy or the like. The key feature of a parable is that it uses a situation which is very simple to make a more complex or general point, often a moral one. Also, unlike a fable, parable does this with people, not animals. This classification defines the gift of the Magi, which is a remarkably simple story. It boils down to a few bare essentials. Della and Jim are poor, but they love each other very much. They each want to buy the perfect Christmas gift for the other. They each have one prized possession, which they give up to buy the other a present, and the presents they buy are meant for the prized possessions they have sacrificed. You don't need to know almost anything else about the story to get it. And there's very little in the story itself that doesn't serve to develop one of these elements. That there is actually something specific to get in the other reason, Gift of the Magi is a parable. It has a point. And yes, it is a moral one. This story is about what it means to give a gift. All of the elements of the story serve to bring the point across. And yes, the slightly preachy tone of the story is part of the parable. That last paragraph especially, which is just a slightly more stylish version of the moral that predictably comes at the end of an Aesop fable. Let us discuss the imagery, symbolism and allegory in the story, which are important elements in O. Henry's stories, more so this particular story. To contrast with the inner richness of Della and Jim's love for each other, O. Henry throws a lot of little details to make their external circumstances about as drab and meager as they can be. He describes the flat where they live. The flat itself, with its malfunctioning mailbox, dead doorbell, worn red carpet and cheap mirror equivalent. There's the dull scene out the window, a grey cat walking a grey fence in a grey backyard. There's Della's old brown jacket and old brown hat, and Jim with his worn overcoat and gloveless hands. All of this imagery creates a contrast between the rich, warm inner world of love and affection which Della and Jim create, and the grey, ugly outer world of money and work and miserly hair-buying business owners. Their love transforms their flat from a particularly drab part of that dreary world into a home. Now let us look at the setting of the story. A drab flat in a grey city on Christmas Eve. The narrator calls our attention almost immediately to the most important details of the story setting. It takes place on Christmas Eve, and its two main characters live in a very unassuming flat. The action of the story depends on the fact that Christmas is sufficiently close that Della needs to buy a present now, even with her small amount of money. The couple's very humble abode brings out their poverty vividly. It's their poverty which both forces them to make the sacrifice they do, and which makes those sacrifices meaningful. O. Henry sketches the flat with just enough detail to convey an image of its squalor. It's cheap, sparsely furnished, and has a broken mailbox and a broken doorbell. The drabness of the physical settings of the story in which Jim and Della live creates a contrast with the warmth and richness of their love for each other. The fact that everything outside the flat is grey, Della watches a grey cat walking a grey fence in a grey backyard, develops the contrast even further. Inside, we get the sense Jim and Della's affection creates a welcoming nest, in spite of the flat's humble nature. Outside, it's a cold grey world, and on that is about an uncaring as Madden so Frawny. As for the larger where and when, we don't have much. In the way of specifics, it is possible the story is set in a city. Flats are the kind of thing you often associate with cities, but not necessarily so. The flat has a backyard which is a little less urban. From the gas which Della lights and the gadgets she has, stove and curling irons, it is a safe bet that the story is set just about the time O. Henry wrote it, first decade of the 20th century or slightly earlier. Now let us discuss O. Henry's style. Most good stories start with a fundamental list of ingredients: the initial situation, conflict, complication, climax, suspense, denouement, and conclusion. Great writers sometimes shake up the recipe and add some spice. Initial situation: $1.80, that was all. That is all the money she has. The story's opening sentence confronts us right away with the problem. Della has only $1.87 to buy a Christmas present, and it's Christmas Eve. After the first paragraph, the narrator gives us a bit more fleshing out of the situation. Della's in a meager flat. She and her husband Jim are poor. She loves her husband more than anything else in the whole world. Plus, she positively needs to buy him that perfect Christmas present. With $1.87, when Della lets down her hair, we also learn the other most important fact for the story. Her hair and Jim's gold watch are the only prized possessions the couple has. Everything is now set up for the rest of the story to unfold. The conflict is supposedly the moment where the problem in the story appears, but this story began right from the first with the problem. In The Gift of the Magi, the point of the conflict actually solves the first problem and replaces it with the second. By selling her hair, Della gets the money to buy Jim a great present, eliminating the first problem through decisive action. Shortly thereafter, she finds the perfect present, so neither the money nor the present is the issue any longer. But now there's a new problem. Will Jim be pleased by Della's action and appreciate her gift, or will he be angry with her for parting with the hair he loved so much? Jim is shocked by Della's short hair. When Jim arrives, he doesn't seem to react well. He stares at Della and can't seem to process that her hair is gone. But it doesn't look like he's angry so much as simply shocked. Della quite can't understand what kind of reaction he's having, nor can we. This creates suspense. We want to know what is he actually feeling. We also want to know how he'll react to Della's gift. When Jim snaps out of his shock, he tells Della and us that his reaction will make us sense when Della opens the present he bought her. When Della opens Jim's present to find the combs, we understand why Jim was so shocked. It also becomes clear now that he is not angry with Della, and he assures her he'll love her no matter how she looks. Although the climax doesn't fully predict the ending, it is the first half of the twist. Jim got the money to buy those combs. We might be able to guess what happens next. We are still waiting to know how Jim will react to Della's gift, and we might also be wondering just how he got the money to buy those expensive combs. Della gives Jim the watch chain, and presented with his gift, Jim calmly reveals with a smile that he sold his watch to buy Della her combs. So her present is useless too. Well, that does it for the Christmas present. Not much left to do but eat those pork chops. Now, who are the Magi? In the narrator's final paragraph, which is definitely a zoom out of epic proportions, the narrator tells us that it doesn't really matter that Jim and Della's present turned out to be useless. They are the wisest givers of all. In fact, they are the Magi. They are feeling satisfied and happy at the end of the story. Let us look at the plot of the story. Most good stories start with a fundamental list of ingredients: the initial situation, complication, climax, suspense, denouement, and the conclusion. Great writers sometimes shake up the recipe and add some spice. O. Henry could have written The Gift of the Magi without the scene in which Della deals with Madame Sofronie. Della could have left the flat with all her hair and returned without it. Then the author could have explained how she had sold it and watch fob for him. But O. Henry realized that the idea of buying and selling human hair might have seemed strange to some of his many readers. It is a trade that calls for a certain amount of discretion, because men and women who wear wigs would naturally prefer to have people think their hair was their own. This explains O. Henry's description of the shop, and his creation of the minor character calls herself Madame Sofronie, a name which suggests when Della stopped to read the sign, Madame Sofronie, hair goods of all kinds, one flight up Della ran and collected herself panting. Madam, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofronie. Will you buy my hair? Asked Della. I buy hair, said Madam. Take your hat off and let's have a look at the looks of it. O. Henry describes the woman as too white because her pale skin does not fit the name Sofronie, which would seem to call for a rather more swarthy complexion. For business purpose, she is pretending to be an artist from somewhere in the Balkans or Turkey, but her complexion and her Brooklyn Irish accent when she says take your hat off and let's have a sight at the looks of it give her away. No doubt she can fake a foreign accent when she wants to, but she wouldn't bother to do so for a poor young girl who is forced to sell her hair. The scene with Madame Sofronie dramatizes Della's ordeal, but it also enlightens uninformed readers that there is a ready market for human hair. In Victor Hugo's novel Les Miserables in 1862, there is a touching scene in which a desperate young prostitute called Fantine sells her hair in order to raise money to send to support her illegitimate daughter. O. Henry may have gotten the idea for a story from Hugo's novel. Now let us look at Jim Young as a minor character. People who have read The Gift of the Magi always think of it as a story about a poor girl who sells her hair to buy her husband a Christmas present. Jim the husband is only a minor character. he is presented mainly through Della's thoughts about him. He does not appear until the story is nearly over, and even then he seems to exist only in his adoring wife's point of view. His sacrifice of his pocket watch is mainly intended to prove to Della that she has no need to worry about losing his love. She tells her husband, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." This is to imply that she does not feel as devastated by the loss of her beautiful hair as she really does. It will take about 8 years for Della's hair to grow back to its former length, and no doubt she will be watching it grow day by day. The other important theme in the short story is the theme of true love. From Della's point of view, her appearance is of less importance to her than her love for Jim. She is willing to sacrifice her beautiful long hair in order to buy a present that will express her love for him. When Jim comes home from work, he is astonished by her appearance. She must look entirely different and even slightly weird, with all that hair replaced by tight little curls held in place by hairpins. But his love for her is of much greater importance than her appearance. He is only astonished because he had sold his watch in order to raise enough money to buy her a Christmas present of a set of combs for her vanished hair. "Don't make any mistake, Dell," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. Neither of them has really lost anything as long as they still have each other. As Shakespeare writes in his sonnet 116, "Let me not, to the marriage of true minds, admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when its alteration finds, or bends with a remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is a star to the every wandering bark, whose words are known, although his height be taken." O. Henry is saying that true love is not and cannot be based on mere appearance. Della loses her beautiful hair but gains something more important, the assurance that Jim truly loves her. And Jim loses his valued watch but gains something more important too, the proof of Della's love for him. No doubt both of these young people realize that they have been attaching too much importance to material things. A popular Irish folk song of O. Henry's time, based on a poem by Thomas Moore, expresses the same thought as Shakespeare's sonnet. The first lines of the song are best known. "Believe me, if all those endearing young charms which I gaze on so fondly today were to change by tomorrow and fleet in my arms, like fairy gifts fading away, thou wouldst still be adored as this moment thou art. Let thy loveliness fade as it will. The conflict is supposedly the moment where the problem in the story appears." But this story began right from the first with a problem. In the gift of the Magi, the point of conflict actually solves the first problem and replaces it with the second. By selling her hair, Della gets the money to buy Jim a great present, eliminating the first problem. Shortly thereafter, she finds the perfect present, so neither the money nor the present is the issue any longer. Complication in the story. Jim is shocked by Della's short hair. When Jim arrives, he doesn't seem to react well. He stares at Della and can't seem to process that her hair is gone. But it doesn't look like he is angry so much as simply shocked. Della can't quite understand what kind of reaction he is having, nor can we. This creates suspense. We want to know what it's actually feeling. We also want to know how he'll react to Della's gift. When Jim snaps out of his shock, he tells Della and us that his reaction will make sense when Della opens the present he bought. When Della opens Jim's present to find the combs, we understand why Jim was so shocked. Suspense in the story. We are still wanting to know how Jim will react to Della's gift, and we might also be wondering just how he got the money to buy those expensive combs Della gives Jim, the watch and chain. Presented with his gift, Jim calmly reveals that he sold his watch to buy Della her combs, so her present is useless too. Well, that does it for the Christmas presents. In many ways, Gift of the Magi is a story about what it means for something to be valuable. Does something's value lie in how much money it is worth, or are other things more valuable than money? The main characters are very poor. This is repeatedly emphasized, and yet the story suggests that the love for each other makes them very rich. It is that love which motivates them to give up the only things of monetary value they have to buy presents for each other. Perhaps their poverty is what enables them to appreciate what really matters. In the narrator's final paragraph, which is definitely a zoom out of epic proportions, the narrator tells us that it doesn't really matter that Jim and Della's present turned out to be useless. They are the wisest givers of all. In fact, they are the Magi. The reader is feeling satisfied and happy. O. Henry intentionally refrains from specifying the nature of Jim's reaction when he enters the flat and sees Della without her hair. The author says what the expression is not. It is not anger, nor suspense, nor surprise, nor disapproval, not horror, nor any of the sentiments that could have been prepared for. It is just peculiar. O. Henry is saving the big revelation for a bit later, when Jim will explain that he had sold his watch to buy Della a set of tortoise-shell combs. If Jim's reaction when he sees Della with her hair gone were too intense, it would detract from the effect of the revelation that he had sold his watch for adornments for her hair. It should be remembered that Jim doesn't understand what has happened when he first sees Della. Obviously, she doesn't have her hair anymore, but maybe this is some new fashion he hasn't heard about. She must be shorn, but she has taken great care to make what remains of her hair as attractive as possible. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. Jim's peculiar look is partly attributable to the fact that at first sight he must think Della has decided to try out a bold new fashion in her hairstyling. She thinks she looks pretty. That is exactly the opposite of what she thinks of herself. This necessitates the explanation that she sold her hair to buy him a watch fob for Christmas, and that in turn necessitates his speaking the line that contains O. Henry's surprise ending. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. O. Henry knew that Jim would have to show some kind of reaction when he entered and saw Della without her long hair. But if Jim looked shocked and horrified, it would detract from the surprise ending O. Henry planned, because it would suggest that Jim had some special reason for expecting to see Della still adorned with her beautiful hair. So O. Henry intentionally describes Jim's reaction as peculiar, which can really tell us nothing. O. Henry can justify the use of the word peculiar because Jim doesn't understand what is going on. He may think Della has adopted an extreme new hairstyle and thinks she looks beautiful. He may think she will expect him to compliment her. He is really not so shocked by his wife's appearance as he is dismayed at the realization that her new hairstyle has caused him to sacrifice his treasured watch for nothing. He is telling the truth when he says he loves her just the same with or without her long hair. Let us summarize the story. Della Young decides to sell her beautiful hair to buy a watch fob for her husband's beloved watch. When Jim comes home, he is saddened and surprised to see Della's beautiful hair missing. He offers her his gift, bejeweled combs that she no longer needs. Della offers her gift to Jim. He looks at her and admits that he has sold his watch to buy her the combs. The two are overcome with love as they realize they have sacrificed their most prized possessions for each other. I think this story truly signifies how well an author can show the deep love two people have for each other. I hope